You want to taste the essence of the wine. And so the way that happens is by us reducing it by about half. Hello, welcome to Chef Shonah's Foodies Over 50, the cooking show for those of us foodies who have crossed over the line to 50 plus, and we're looking to eat healthier and still enjoy great food. Today we'll be making cheesy grits and shrimp. This is one of my favorite dishes to make. I was actually introduced to this dish when I lived in Savannah. I'd never heard of shrimp and grits before I moved to Savannah. I'd heard of fish and grits, but not shrimp and grits. And once I moved there in the low country, in the Georgia and South Carolina areas, cheesy grits and shrimp are a staple. You find it on menus everywhere, and it is basically migrated across much of the South and southwestern United States. So let's go through our ingredients first, and then we'll get started. So we're going to start with some olive oil, and then some diced onions, some diced bell pepper, and some diced red bell pepper. A little bit of crushed red pepper. If you are not tolerant of spice, feel free to leave out the crushed red pepper. Some minced garlic, some white wine, diced tomatoes with their juice. And these basically come from a can. You can use regular diced tomatoes. You can use the sun-dried diced tomatoes. If you are watching your sodium, you can buy the reduced or no salt added diced tomatoes. Tomato paste, a little bit of fresh thyme. Got a little sugar in here, some salt, some pepper, and some smoked paprika. Then of course our shrimp, peeled and deveined. That covers the shrimp piece. And for the grits piece, I've got coconut milk. And this recipe is actually inspired by a recipe that I found in a healthy Southern cooking cookbook written by Eric and Shonah Jones. And I really like the fact that he used coconut milk instead of cream or half and half in the grits. And that makes this dish pretty versatile for people who are lactose intolerant or who don't eat dairy, or even people who are pescatarians. So the coconut milk is a great addition, and the thing is, it doesn't make the grits taste like coconut either. I have some chicken broth. If you're making this dish for a pescatarian, you'd want to use vegetable broth instead. If you are watching your sodium, make sure you choose a brand of chicken broth that is either no salt added or reduced sodium. And then I have my grits. Now, if you notice, these grits are yellow, and in fact, they're not grits at all. They are polenta, which is basically the Italian version of grits. And the difference between polenta and the grits that we typically use here in the United States are that polenta is made from yellow corn instead of white corn, hence the yellow color. And the texture is slightly different, but I like the way the polenta cooks, and so that's why I'm using polenta in this recipe. Then we have some unsalted butter. And I like to use unsalted butter as opposed to salted butter because that gives me more control over the sodium and the amount of salt that I put in a recipe. And here I have a mixture of some salt, pepper, dried oregano, and a little touch of crushed red pepper. So once again, if you're sensitive to spice, feel free to leave out the crushed red pepper. And then finally, of course, we're talking cheesy grits, so we have to have our cheese. So we have some grated Gouda cheese. You can use regular Gouda, or I especially love the flavor of smoked Gouda, and some grated Parmesan. We're gonna start first with the shrimp piece of it, and what we will do is get this going, get this simmering, and then while it's simmering, we'll start working on our grits. The goal is for you to be able to prepare this dish in about 30 minutes. So that's why we want to be efficient with our time. So starting with our shrimp, gonna pour some oil in my skillet that I preheated, and it's starting to shimmer, which tells me that it is nice and hot. And we're gonna add my diced red onions, my diced green bell peppers, and my diced red bell peppers. And we're gonna mix this up. And then I'm gonna go ahead and add my crushed red pepper to this. Let me turn up my fire a little. I love cooking with cast iron. It cooks evenly, so you don't have to worry about the hot spots that you see a lot of times when you're cooking in a non-stick skillet or even in some of the stainless steel skillets. So Grandma wasn't wrong when she always cooked in a cast iron skillet. So that's simmering. So while that's simmering, I'm gonna go ahead and start working on my grits. So we will add the chicken broth and the coconut milk to my pot. And I'm gonna head to the stove behind me to let this begin cooking, and we're gonna let this come to a boil. Okay, so we'll let that be working. So I'm coming back over here to my onion and bell pepper mixture. And we want our vegetables to get nice and tender. But we're actually going to be adding some additional ingredients to our vegetables, and so they will begin to cook and caramelize and get tender as we go along. So next I'm going to add my minced garlic and incorporate that into my onion and pepper mixture. So at this point, my veggies are beginning to get tender and they're beginning to smell really good. And next we're going to add a little white wine. And we're going to cook this until the wine reduces by about half. And we do this, we want our wine to reduce because the wine is meant to complement the dish, not to overpower it. So when you eat it, you don't want to taste the wine. You want to taste the essence of the wine. And so the way that happens is by us reducing it by about half. And the flavor of the wine also begins to permeate the vegetables, which actually boosts the flavor. And next we're going to add our tomatoes. Our tomato paste. And tomato paste is great because what it does is it boosts the flavor. Tomato paste is concentrated tomatoes. And we want that because we really want a stronger tomato flavor in our shrimp and grits. And the tomato paste provides that extra boost of what's called umami. And umami is our fifth taste bud. And we find umami flavor in things like tomatoes, mushrooms, a lot of our Asian cuisine, so soy sauce that's used in Asian cuisine, and mushrooms. So we mix this together, and then I'll add my mixture of sugar, salt, a little bit of black pepper, and some smoked paprika. So you may be asking, why am I adding sugar? Well, it's great to add a touch of sugar to any tomato dish that you're making because the sugar actually helps to cut the acidity of the tomatoes. So we're not adding enough sugar to actually taste the sweetness, we're adding just enough to cut the acidity. And then the last thing is I'm actually going to add some fresh thyme. If you don't have fresh thyme, feel free to use dried thyme. So I've mixed all of this together and we're gonna let this simmer for about 10 to 15 minutes and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Our tomato sauce is coming to a nice simmer and my broth and my coconut milk have come to a boil. So now I'm going to add my polenta and stir to combine it well. And add my butter. And the butter will melt as this cooks. So I'm gonna take this back to the stove behind me and let the polenta cook. It'll take about 5 to 7 minutes. Okay. The great thing about polenta is, unlike the grits that we use here in the United States, you don't have to stand there over the pot and stir, 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 stir. But if you are using regular grits instead of polenta, you will need to stand and stir, 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 because there's nothing worse than lumpy grits. And the way to make sure that does not happen is to constantly stir the grits for about 5 minutes. And after that, they'll be fully incorporated and you won't have to worry about your lumps. So I'm gonna go over here and stir up our tomato mixture. It's come to a very nice simmer. And we're gonna let this cook down a little more. And then we'll add our shrimp at the very end. With shrimp, it doesn't take any time for them to cook, so we're gonna wait until the very end, add them in, let it cook for about 2 to 3 minutes, and that's all you need for your shrimp. The last thing you want is overcooked shrimp, because once they get overcooked, they're gonna be rubbery and it'll totally ruin your dish. And I'm gonna go check on my grits and we'll be right back. And welcome back. Our polenta has cooked and it is nice and creamy. So the next thing we need to add is the cheese. So I have some Gouda here that I have freshly grated. And feel free, you don't have to use Gouda. If there's another type of cheese that you like, feel free to use that. I'm just a big fan of the flavor of Gouda combined with grits or polenta. But you can use cheddar, you can use, if you even want to use like a Gruyere, that would be great. But you want to use a cheese that has a stronger flavor, because you really want the cheese flavor to come out in your grits. So I've incorporated my Gouda, and next I'm going to add some grated Parmesan. And I love Parmesan cheese. The more Parmesan, the better. And because Parmesan is a saltier cheese, you really want to monitor how much salt you add to your polenta or your grit mixture, because then it might be too salty. So I've added my Parmesan, and then the last thing I'm going to do is to add my seasoning blend, which is my salt, my pepper, and some dried oregano. Oh, and I can smell those spices combining with my grits. Okay. Now the great thing about using grits or polenta is that since they're made from corn, it's a complex carbohydrate as opposed to a simple carbohydrate, which means it's not going to cause your blood sugar to spike as much as some of the simple carbohydrates like a white rice. And so it actually does make it a healthier option for eating for breakfast or for a savory dish like we're making today with the shrimp mixture. So I'm going to go over here to my shrimp, my tomato mixture for my shrimp, and it's had time to cook down and the flavors have had a chance to combine, and the tomato juice and the wine have had a chance to evaporate slightly. So the last thing we'll do is to actually add our shrimp. And you want to make sure that whatever shrimp you use, that it's been peeled, of course, and deveined. And depending on what part of the country you live in, that's going to dictate what kind of shrimp you get. If you are closer to the Gulf, like I am in Texas, we use a lot of white Gulf shrimp in our dishes. The other type of shrimp that has been very popular in the Houston area where I live is the red Argentinian shrimp, which is I also love to use as well. And it's okay to buy your shrimp. You can buy it fresh, or you can buy it frozen. And actually, sometimes the frozen shrimp is going to be fresher than the shrimp that you get at the seafood counter because it's been flash frozen. So as soon as they catch the shrimp, they flash freeze it. And so don't feel like you have to go out and get fresh shrimp. Frozen shrimp is great. All you have to do is thaw it out and it's ready to go. We're gonna give our shrimp a couple more minutes to cook and we'll be right back. Welcome back. So our shrimp have had a chance to cook and our grits are ready. So now it's time to eat. So I'm gonna put our grits in this nice deep bowl because we want the grits to have room to spread. And then once we add our shrimp, we'll have plenty of room for the tomato shrimp mixture to spread, and that'll make a really pretty bowl. Okay, so we've got our grits. And we're spooning our shrimp tomato mixture. This looks so good. We'll add one more shrimp to this bowl, a nice big bowl. Okay, and there you have it, cheesy grits and shrimp. Welcome back. So we're at the very end of this episode, cheesy grits and shrimp. And one of the things I'd like to close with is just a little nutrition nugget. So of course the star of this dish is, I would say, the shrimp. And so let's talk a little bit about the nutrition benefits of shrimp. First of all, it's low in calories. It's one of the best food sources of iodine, which is actually required for proper thyroid function and your brain health. It's also a good source of omega-3 fatty acids, which are good for our brain and for our heart. And the omega-3 fatty acids in shrimp help to overcome the high cholesterol that we find in the shrimp. So those two even each other out from a health perspective. So it still makes it a pretty healthy thing for us to eat. And the other thing that it does is it's an excellent source of protein, which we need as we age because our muscles, we lose a lot of muscle mass as we age. So having the extra protein is something that we really need in our diets. So that's what makes this dish great from the perspective of having the shrimp in it. So thank you so much for joining me today. I am Chef Shonah with Chef Shonah's Foodies Over 50. Feel free to follow me on Instagram at chef_Shonah. Thanks so much, and I look forward to seeing you at our next episode.